Welcome to Green Money Matters, the podcast where your financial future meets the planet's well-being, bringing you the latest on climate issues and uncovering new and exciting investment opportunities that make a positive impact.
And I'm Chris Everett, your guide to sustainable investing, ESG funds, and all things green. Each week, we'll explore the intersection of money and sustainability, showing you how investing wisely can create a greener world and grow your money.
So get ready to invest with a conscience and join the growing movement of individuals who are reshaping the financial landscape. Welcome to Green Money Matters.
Let's get this going. So, quick introduction. Dr. Amrit Chandan, visionary entrepreneur, esteemed speaker, dedicated advocate for sustainability and innovation. Amrit is the co-founder of Aceleron, an innovative clean tech company designing and building sustainable, smarter, and safer batteries. He has an awful lot of interesting startup technology and other enterprises going on as well. We're going to get under the bonnet there and find out what else he's been doing. Amrit, Dr. Chandan, welcome to Green Money Matters. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing at the moment.
Thank you so much for having me on, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. So, I guess just to introduce myself, I started my career with a Ph.D. in hydrogen fuel cell technology in chemical engineering. I caught the bug for sustainability pretty early on when a UN scientist came to our research group and said, the world is beyond saving. So don't even try, just give up, live your best life. Yeah, this is super depressing to hear at the start of one's career. So I decided, after sort of internalizing that message pretty early on, that I wanted to accept the challenge and try and make a difference in this space. So I finished my PhD, then started working in the low-carbon vehicle space. And that's where I met my co-founder of Aceleron, Carlton. So we saw that there was a massive number of batteries coming to market. This was back when the best electric vehicle on the market was you had the Tesla Roadster or you had the Nissan Leaf. So this was in the early days of the wild west of electric vehicles, just around the time that we signed the Paris Agreement in that year. So we saw there were so many batteries coming to market, but there was no good way of dealing with the waste that they generate. So we figured that there was enough of a space here for a solution and started taking our batteries and came up with a new way of putting them together, which didn't involve any permanent techniques at all. So it enabled long-term maintenance and reuse and repair of the batteries. And we did that for about 7 years. We grew the company, raised capital, the corporate partnerships, won the T-shirt, got the scars. And then middle of last year, we were approached by one of our licensing partners who wanted to buy the technology. And so it made sense for us at the time to sell what we had built into a partner that wanted to take it and scale it for use in the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler segments all across Southeast Asia and in Africa as well. And had the option of staying with the company, but decided I wanted to explore new horizons. And so left when that sort of process was coming to its conclusion. And after sort of taking a break for a few months, I've been working on a new project. So that's briefly me and my time with Aceleron.
Okay, that's fascinating. Then I'm going to come back to Aceleron, the clean battery space. But introduce us to what it is you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of a new startup called Gauge 19. And what we're looking at here is actually using AI co-pilots for the 80% who are not based in the office doing standard tasks. So the premise is...
You're going to have to tell me what you're going to have to tell me what an AI co-pilot is. So I can guess, but tell me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so it's a tool. It's basically an AI-based tool that is providing support to people as they're doing various tasks. So literally it's like having someone there next to you giving you support as you do your job.
Okay.
So I guess the idea for this came about when there were three instances that come to mind. One of our investors in Aceleron, we had one of the corporate venture teams of Toyota, and I remember having a conversation there where they said so many of their vehicles end up in Africa at some point in their life. And if you've ever been to sub-Saharan Africa, and this is true across Southeast Asia as well, there's a multitude of these hole-in-the-wall type shops where for generations they've known how to deal with internal combustion engine vehicles. And as these vehicles become more hybridized and electrified and at one point fully electric, there is a big question mark around how that servicing continues, especially for people who don't have access to the high-tech equipment or necessarily the information in how to service these. So in my mind, there was a sort of seed planted there around We've got sort of this green transition happening, but we have so many people that are being left behind in that transition. And yeah, the other instances where I remember once we were watching an installer install a battery, a heat pump, and a solar system, and sat there for hours reading different manuals on a phone, downloading things, trying to figure out why device A wasn't talking to device B, wasn't talking to device C. Mm-hmm. And it just felt so inefficient. Actually, there were two instances like that sort of stuck in my mind. So as I was looking around for sort of new ideas, this sort of was in the back of the mind, and yeah, started talking to lots of different companies in the space and narrowing down on that sort of problem statement, and it's been received really well so far. So as I say, early days yet, but we've got some really interesting and exciting pilots underway, particularly in the renewable space, where we know that we need 26 million new jobs globally by 2030 in order to achieve net zero, and 20% of the current workforce are due to retire. So there's a massive challenge, and there's a quote by Andy Lane from BP where he says, we're more likely to run out of people before we run out of the money to finance the transition. And so looking at that sort of challenge and looking at how do we make it so that people are able to access these jobs, take part in the transition and not be left behind, especially when most AI models are not targeting that 80% of the workforce who are not doing standard office-based tasks. It's a really interesting challenge for me.
But how does it look and feel? So going back to your example, you've got some guys in a little town in sub-Saharan Africa trying to repair an electric vehicle. How is the co-pilot going to support that? Talk me through how that would look.
Yeah, of course. So the idea is that we'd be able to work with the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, to take all that information they have, the technical documentation, the way things should be done, the operating procedures, ingest that all into a large language model, and then make that sort of available to people. So as they're going through and trying to make things, figure out why this thing isn't working, they're able to just ask a question and get that answer back straight away. And that's really important in this day and age, because as we're seeing more and more this generational divide, so emerging talent, they are consuming information in different ways. So they don't want to be sat in a meeting room for 5 days learning about something and being sort of talked at. They want to be sort of active, and they want to ask a question, get an answer. They'd like to see sort of a YouTube video or perhaps a TikTok video to sort of see how people are doing things before they actually do it themselves. So it's a different way of doing things. And also, emerging talent, they don't want to be in a single field for the whole of their career. They want to be moving around. It presents a challenge of sort of the experience being dilutive over time, whereas before you'd have had sort of people in a job becoming the sort of Jedi masters at that particular thing that they know really well.
Yeah.
And then that sort of is becoming more of a challenge to replenish.
So you're going to make all these trainers redundant, are you, Amrit?
No, not at all. If anything, it's very much augmenting rather than sort of replacing.
Yeah. And I mean, the opportunities for that seem huge. I mean, give me some other examples. Who's going to help and assist?
Yeah, so there are three parts to this. First is we want to be able to reduce the burden on experienced people. I remember talking to a senior VP, one of the large energy companies, who told me in a power station control room 15 years ago, you would have had 3 20-year experienced PhD qualified engineers managing everything. And now you have one of those in a back room supporting multiple teams of juniors. So you create inadvertently, just through natural attrition over time, you've got these single points of failure that are coming into existence. So one of the things we want to do is reduce the burden on these experienced workers. Because often more experienced people in an organization are there really to add value in a more strategic sense, or to sort of apply their thinking to new ways of doing things. And what you don't want are those senior people being bogged down with basic tier 1 type tasks, which someone with just a bit of experience would be able to handle themselves. So we want to be able to sort of help shoulder that burden and take some of those tier 1 support challenges away. We want to capture what we call tribal knowledge. So this is information which is generally known within an organization, but is not written down because it's just the way we do things around here. We know that if we're going to fit this device, we need to wiggle that wire 3 times and we need to hit it with a hammer 5 times, and then it will just work. And that may not be the standard operating procedure. That may not be how things are recorded, but it's just generally known, and it's passed through that vague diffusion of information or osmosis of information through the workforce. So we want to be able to help capture that in a more seamless way. And then we want to make that information much more accessible for emerging talent. So as people are coming through and then they're learning, they're able to engage with what they're doing in a much easier way, in a way that's suited the generation that's the future, basically.
So, playing devil's advocate slightly. So, what are the risks associated? We love devil's advocates, don't we? So, what are the risks associated with that? Potentially, that the AI process omits certain crucial data or includes false data. Is that any different from human errors? Just different errors? What are the risks?
It's a really great question, Chris. So what we're looking at is a particular type of AI model, which is not generating new information. It's retrieving information that's already existing within the data set. So the idea is that if it's telling you something, you should be able to go and have a look exactly where it's got that information from. Now, having said that, you probably, as with all things, you don't want to rely on a tool if it's a life-critical scenario. So, as an example, there's a bit in the early Simpsons where there's going to be a sort of meltdown in the nuclear reactor. And of course, it's Homer's terminal where he's supposed to press the right button in order to stop the meltdown event from occurring. And it flashes back in time to when he was having his training. And the trainer's telling him, in an event of a meltdown, you've got to press this button right here. And he's just busy sort of on his Rubik's Cube, clearly not listening to the training at all. And then they flash forward and he's got sort of 45 seconds on the clock, and he pulls out this big binder of information and he's trying to figure out which part of it is it that he's supposed to look at, and then he in the end resorts to doing eeny meeny miny mo on the console. And of course it's a sitcom, so presses the right button and it all kind of works. But I mean, in some ways that's exactly the kind of scenario where an AI tool would be great and very helpful. But in another sense, you probably wouldn't want to, because it's such a critical situation, you probably wouldn't want to rely on that. And you make sure you have people who are properly trained and highly specialized in the role there to support.
Yeah, 100%. Something else just occurs to me, this sense of tribal knowledge, and that's a great way of describing it. For a ruthless company organization that's looking for efficiencies in the workforce, and we've seen it many times before, where there are swathes of the workforce let go for whatever reason. Does this make it easier for that sort of ruthless organization to implement those radical human changes on the negative side, certainly for the humans involved?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're finding, and this is particularly true with jobs that are in the field, there's not a single company we've spoken to so far that have said that they have too many people and they really are struggling to get rid of people. Actually, it's the other way around. So one of the things we've heard loud and clear is that retention is so finding people is a massive challenge, and then retaining those people is the second big challenge they have. So some companies we've spoken to, and there's probably 6 or 7 that are coming to top of my mind already, where they have on open, they just have it like a revolving door application for field engineers. So because they can't get enough of these people, there's a real shortage of them coming through, but they've got jobs that are reliant on having people physically in a premises doing so. And until you've got sort of sophisticated robotics that can mimic everything a human does, that you can send out and it's sort of basically analogous to a human, I don't think it's feasible for a lot of these companies to even think about downsizing in that sort of way, because they really struggle with even finding people, let alone sort of retaining them.
Okay, of course, that's good to hear. So how long a process is it to garner all the knowledge and information? What process do you go through when you go to a company and say, look, I'm going to make life so much easier for you. I'm going to make the transition really easy for you. I'm going to help your workforce. What do you need to do? What do you need from the company? And how does that process look?
Yeah, so it depends on the company. It depends on how sophisticated the organization is. So there are certainly some organizations where actually the amount of paperwork they have is fairly limited. And to some extent, this is one of the reasons why we're taking a sector approach and focusing heavily on the renewable space, because you can actually add a lot of value to those companies just bringing a base load of information to them that they may not have had access to before or necessarily have written down. For other organizations where they're much more sophisticated, they have teams writing things down all the time, it would be a fairly quick process. In terms of capturing that tribal knowledge, again, it depends on how much and the variety. I mean, we're talking to some companies who have got maybe 15 to 20 sort of different product sets, and we're talking to others who have 200,000 different product sets. So, depending on the scale of the organization and what they're doing exactly, that process could be relatively quick or relatively long. I guess maybe sort of the trite answer is, how long is a piece of string?
Yeah, no, understood. Yeah, and I can quite understand that it depends on the scale of the company and the size of the company and the scale of the operations and all those sorts of things. So a string answer is perfectly acceptable. So you're focusing on the renewable space. Talk me through that. Tell us a little bit more about examples of the sort of organizations or industries in which you're specifically focusing.
Yeah, so we're looking at companies as varied as sort of solar companies with their installers, all the way through to heat pumps, to battery companies, and so on. So just looking at the variety of different technologies that need people in the field installing devices, servicing devices, maintaining those devices, wherever there's that know-how that needs to be in place.
Okay. How do you see the market for sustainable energy solutions evolving over the next few years, decade or so?
I think this is a massive growth opportunity, especially in the UK, because the government, for example, the new Labour government are investing heavily in Great British Energy, and there's a lot of emphasis on this. And I think it's absolutely right and needed. We need, if we're going to lower our energy bills, for example, bringing it right home, we need to have more renewables on the market and available. And we also need to look at reform of the way the current system works as well, where everything is tied to one price. So, people who have got renewables are able to take advantage and actually see lower bills as well. So I know there was some talk recently about people living close to wind farms, for example, having lower energy bills. I think that's a great thing. It also helps to combat NIMBYism as well.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that sounds like a fair exchange, really. If you've got a large windmill in your backyard, then there should be some degree of compensation or advantage for that. And in your previous guise with Aceleron, you are known for promoting the concept of a circular economy. Have you taken that sense, that drive, that concept with you, and how do you see that out in practice?
Yeah, very much, Chris. So my career goals, I've got 3 goals that I'm aiming for over the span of my career. I want to help offset more than a gigaton of CO2. I want to positively impact more than 100 million people around the world. And I want to create something, be involved with projects that are worth more than $1 billion. So these are things which I want to do. And the circular economy is absolutely needed. One of my favorite phrases, it's a Native American saying where it goes something like, we borrow the resources of future generations. And I think it's a lovely sentiment, because all of these resources are there for us as all to share and sort of have, but they're not our resources. They're there for us to safeguard and make sure that the next generation has equal access to those as well. And for a long time, we've been pretty wasteful and destroying a lot of those resources. And now's the time for us to really change that and go back to that model of, we want to recycle 99% of everything that we have, maybe more if we can, as close to a complete closed loop as we can possibly get it, in order to ensure the long-term survival of humanity on the planet.
Yeah, the exploitative era must be well and truly over. If we're not into regeneration across the board, then there's nothing for us to inherit. You're absolutely right. How far along are you on your journey to saving a gigaton of CO2 then?
Yeah, so that's a good question as well.
How do you measure it?
How do you measure it? That's the next part of the challenge. That's the next step down, actually being able to measure it. Yeah. So something I used to measure quite a lot at Aceleron, sort of looking at one of the things I was really interested in was tracking the impact we were having, partly because I'm a bit of a data nerd and that's something that really interests me, but partly because we were also working with impact organizations and it was something we needed to report on as well. The truth is there's no easy way to do it. So it's something which hopefully becomes more sophisticated time. But like I say, this is something that's career long and I'm still relatively early in my career. So still got some way to go, and something which I think if I can aim towards it, even if I don't quite get there, as long as I'm sort of on that journey, it'll still be pretty good.
Yeah, totally. I mean, aim for the stars. How terrible is it if you hit the moon? Trajectory is the thing, isn't it? I totally agree. The AI industry, I mean, can you call it an industry? I mean, it's a technological revolution. Do you have direct competitors in your specific field? Or there's so many overlaps that you can't tell where one competitor and one partner starts or finishes?
I'd say it's probably more the latter. There is quite a lot of activity going on in this space. We've not seen anyone directly doing what we're looking at, but certainly sort of elements of it. There does exist sort of companies which are looking at it. I think from my perspective, if we can sort of create bigger impact through partnership, then fantastic. And also, I think this, because it is such a sort of nascent industry and the hype is so high at the moment, at some point, it's all going to crash. that's just the way these things go. You have these sort of hype cycles, and we're sort of right at the peak of the AI hype cycle at the moment. Maybe coming down on the other side potentially, but yeah. So we're going to sort of pretty soon enter the trough of disillusionment, and that's something which I think sort of the industry will need to be prepared for. And there will be a consolidation. There will be less interest, but it'll build again. It's just the way these things go. I mean, my sort of area of interest originally was in hydrogen, and still is, but not sort of working in it directly. And that's been going through hype cycles since the 60s, maybe even earlier. Like it's been a while. So these things, they do sort of get this cyclical in nature and will continue to be so. But I think it'll be, and what I'm keen to do with Gauge 19 is we want to create a strong business on the fundamentals that we're solving a real problem, and we're creating a painkiller, not a vitamin, as it were. Creating something which is really taking away someone's pain as opposed to is a nice to have.
Yeah.
And it's not being looked at or used because it's an AI technology, but rather because it's doing something meaningful. And then we can figure out the rest later.
Okay. My understanding of AI is probably at best rudimentary, but as I understand it, the capacity needed as AI expands, that requires more computational power, more energy, more fuel. How do you sit within that cycle? What answers are you looking for in order to make AI sustainable, or to be sustainable within an AI industry?
So I think it needs a bit of both, Chris. It's not a silly question at all. For example, I think it was Google recently who said that their net zero target has been pushed out by a couple of years because of the explosion of AI and just how much more energy they're taking in as a result. So this is definitely a concern. What I would say, though, is that it also presents a massive opportunity. So there is so much work that is going on in how to optimize, increase the efficiencies, reduce the computational expense of AI, but also then greening of data centers and greening of the computational power that's required as well. I think added to that, there's going to be a whole look at the recycling and sort of circularity that exists within that space. So GPUs, for example, have never been in higher demand. We can see this in the share price of NVIDIA. Yeah. And that's something which we need to make sure we're not walking into another trap where all of the resources we're sort of putting into these devices, they become outdated so quickly, they're thrown away, not recycled properly, not treated with the respect they need. And then on the other side, you've got sort of sustainability within AI. So if we can use it to promote sustainable activities, we can get more wind farms installed, we can get more solar parks installed, etc., that help people with their sort of general day-to-day efficiency, then it's having a sort of positive effect. And hopefully that positive effect is greater than the negative effect of the computation itself.
Yeah, understood. So one of the sort of the concepts or ideas we like to work on within Green Money Matters is obviously sustainable investment. You've been an entrepreneur, you've started businesses, starting this new, very exciting business. What sort of methodologies do you use when you're analyzing, assessing an investment opportunity? How do you also rank it according to external sustainability metrics or measures, or your own? Talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. So one of the things I didn't mention is I'm also an entrepreneur in residence with Carbon 13. So Carbon 13 are a group based out of at Cambridge, but also in Berlin as well, actually. They sort of bring together founders who don't have ideas predominantly, and they sort of let them percolate together, form teams and come up with ideas, and all with a view to each company that they support being able to help offset more than sort of 10 million tons of CO2 per year. And so my role sort of within Carbon 13, I support the founders on their journey, helping them to take what they have from a concept stage into something which could be invested in to get their pre-seed funding or their first funding. So in the context of early stage investing, it's interesting kind of seeing and working with companies both through Carbon 13 and outside of Carbon 13 as well on their funding rounds, and having pitched for funding myself and having some candid conversations with investors. I think for me personally, the things which I look for are, the first thing is the team. Do I believe that the team will work together really well, that they have good chemistry, that they have the founder market fit, that they have some knowledge and contacts within the industry as well that can give them a good leg up? It's really important that the value fit and the founder fit is strong, because otherwise it's like trying to build a house on cracked foundations. If that relationship isn't right, no matter how much you try and build on it, it's going to fall apart at some point. And when challenges are hard and You want people that are really committed, and you want people that will know how to navigate, or at least try and come up with the answers as best they can, and but are willing to take on advice and take on support as well. So that's such an important part of the puzzle, actually, having that in place. Because the last thing you want is, when times are tough, a company will come along and knock on the door and say, "Do you want a job?" And suddenly one of the founders is out the door, sort of thinking, "I'll just earn a living sort of working for someone else." So that's the first thing. And then the second thing for me is, do I feel like the problem they're solving is one which is able to, again, reach that 10 million tons as an arbitrary number, but sort of a meaningful difference in the climate space? And do I feel that the technology that they have is something which isn't, well, I guess at the basic level, isn't breaking the laws of thermodynamics? So a number of perpetual motion devices and the pseudoscience type things you come across is pretty amazing, and is also something which can be protected and something which can be built upon, and something really special about it that's different from anything else out there. So those are the three things which I think are really important. So you've got the team, you've got the technology that they're using, and the space that they're sort of targeting, and then are they actually solving something which is a real problem?
How do you measure that return, especially in fields like renewable, sustainability, and now AI? They're so fluid. How do you nail that down and say, this is going to give me 15% return? How do you nail that?
I mean, it's a black science, isn't it? Or black art, Chris, especially in the early stage space, because you don't know. There are so many factors of why a company could not make it. They have nothing to do with the people, the tech at all. Like, it could be market forces. I've heard horror stories of some companies that are ditched by their lead investor for no reason than internal politics. They've got nothing to do with the company at all, and they're just victim to that. There's nothing they can do about it. So there's a massive luck element to all of this as well, where sometimes technologies get into market because they can, and sometimes they don't because they're blocked by other factors. So it's almost like treating it like it's a bet, but taking the bets which you think have got the best chance of success based on the team, the space, the technology that they have, and be it taking a sort of diversified approach to it, or perhaps investing through funds which are specialized for that. Like, for example, the COM13 team, they have an SEIS fund where an investor will invest in a portfolio of companies as opposed to any individual one.
Yeah. So the last few years in particular, what have been your greatest learnings from that process? Where did it hurt the most, I guess, is part of that question.
So I was talking to a good friend, Chris, who maybe we should have a conversation about getting on your podcast as well, who told me that it's such a difficult one. This friend of mine told me if he'd left all his money in the stock market, he would have made more money than through angel investing. That's not to say it shouldn't be done at all. It definitely has a place and is very important. But it's just interesting how some investors get very lucky because the bets they place are good ones, and others don't, because, again, just factors outside of control. And I think the other thing that has surprised me over the last couple of years is the companies which I thought would do really well based on some of these factors, how they haven't, because, again, just the difficulty, like the market at the moment is not great for raising money for a sort of early stage company.
Yeah.
Very difficult market at the moment. And so the number of companies I've seen shut down as a result of that. There's one company I was talking to recently, I thought the founding team were great. And then next thing I know, they've fallen apart and just decided not to continue together. And these things, they happen, and it's really difficult to see, but it's just part of the attrition in an early stage venture.
Yeah.
Sorry if that's a bit bleak, Chris. It's just just the observations I've seen.
No, I mean, like, I get it. So much of this is educated guesses and instinctive bets. A lot of it is about really good knowledge, experience, and expertise, but some of it is just about the winds of fortune.
Yeah, I think it's really positive signal when the founding team are able to get good conversations going with big corporates. And again, if they're solving a real problem and it's easier for them to get into market, it's easy for them to get something together quickly which someone's going to buy. It's a very, very strong signal that it's something worth getting involved with and worth backing.
Yeah, and I think your analysis around, is it a paracetamol that you've invented, or is it vitamin K? Yeah, I think that's a good measure for any analysis.
I've seen loads of startups where they say we've got a new wind turbine design, and that's going to result in a 3% or 4% increase in wind blade efficiency, which means more power generated. And on the one hand, that's great, and that's really useful. On the other hand, you think about how much money has been invested by Siemens or ThyssenKrupp or any of these big engineering companies in their manufacturing lines for wind turbine blades, they're not going to re-engineer all of that for a 3, 4, 5% increase in efficiency. It's just not going to happen. And so that, in my mind, is sort of an example of the vitamin. It's useful, it's great, but the chance of it actually is not solving a real pain point because no one's asking for that. What they want is a substantial design, which means that the wake effect is reduced and they can cram more wind turbines in a smaller sort of space and they can do more interesting things with it. Or, yeah, I'm just making this up, but that's the kind of thing which may be more, so some of it is sort of a bit of critical thinking on, what is the end customer actually looking for from this?
No, I can see that in some of these major capital projects. They're scaled over a 20-year period. So no one's going to scrap something and start again for 3 or 4% gain, especially when, 10, 15 years down the line, something entirely new or the landscape has changed entirely. So is there any more advice you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are passionate about sustainability and clean technology?
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of the number one piece of advice I can give is, as early as possible, make sure that you have identified what the problem is that you're solving. And this sounds really obvious, but when I say sort of identify the problem, I mean being able to succinctly say in a statement exactly what that pain statement is that you're able to solve for, to the point where it's really specific. So, for example, if I think back to Aceleron, there's a big problem around the batteries that are coming to the end of life, and that's a massive challenge. We can see that, how they're dealt with and who recycles them, but specifically who is experiencing that pain. Is it the car OEM? Is it the homeowner? Is it the battery OEM? Is it the battery management system OEM? Like, who specifically is experiencing that pain and what are they specifically experiencing within that wider problem space? So if you can get to a place where it's really specific and you're sure you're creating the painkiller, not the vitamin, then you're onto a really sort of positive step.
Excellent. Looking back over your very successful career, is there anything you would have done differently?
So much, Chris. I think I reflect on my time at Aceleron, and I think, and I don't do this as a sort of with a view to self-flagellation, but 90% of the decisions I made, I would do differently if I had the chance to do them again. So knowing what I know now, if I experience that challenge again, it would be very, very different. So, but I think this is the beauty of being able to start again. And certainly one of the things that drew me to wanting to start again was taking all of those learnings and being able to do it that way, do it that better way next time. I like to think about it. There's a sort of exponential curve that we're on when you're in a startup, and how far you get and where you start on that exponential curve is based on your experience and the problem and the market and everything else. And so ideally, each time you start a startup, you're starting higher up that exponential curve. So it should take less time to get to that place of big return. That's the theory. So hopefully I'll be able to prove that with this new startup.
Yeah, I'm confident. So you're a very positive man. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you going and inspired?
So there's two things which keep me going. One, I think naturally you have to be optimistic in order to make it as an entrepreneur. It's very difficult otherwise because everything is going wrong all the time. There's fires everywhere. And the second thing is I came to the realization, when I think back to that sort of UN scientist talking, and back then, this was like 2009, 2010, but sort of back then, films like The Day After Tomorrow were coming out, and I used to laugh at those and think that's never going to be that quick. And so the climate problem was something which was 2100 was the sort of the time frame that it would be really sort of felt and needed to be worried about. But it feels like it's accelerating. And each year that goes by, I don't know about you, Chris, but I find it sort of deeply unsettling when I see trees blooming in seasons when they shouldn't bloom and plants blooming when they shouldn't, noticing the sort of loss of insect biodiversity and just still seeing how much inequality there exists within the world. So there's a sort of all of this which I think needs to be righted. But then I think about who's got to right that wrong. And it's our generation that are alive and working now. And it's the next generation. And I have 2 young boys. I've got a 3-year-old and I've got a 1-year-old. And every time I think about them in their careers and their lifespan, facing challenges which I can only sort of dream about because of just how much damage we're doing now, that's what motivates me. I want to make sure that the world is better for them and for all the other children as well.
Excellent. Yeah, if you're not doing it for them, Who are you doing it for? And it's interesting, our perspective, our human perspective on how things change is so narrow that we barely see a very tiny window of change from what it was like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago to now. But ask a generation older than us or older than us again what changes they've seen. And this is severely impactful. So if we've got people like you, Amrit, with your shoulders to the wheel, moving the dial a little bit further, a little bit faster, hopefully, and making some positive change, that's great.
Another one of my favourite quotes, Chris, I think this is an ancient Greek one. I'm going to paraphrase it because I always butcher it, but hopefully you've got the sentiment. A society grows great when old people plant trees under whose shade they shall not sit. So I think that's sort of something that resonates with me deeply. This is not about me. This is about the children and the future children, the future generations that we don't even know yet.
And Aceleron and Gauge 19, these are all trees that you're planting, and that's absolutely fantastic. So can we see the tree of Gauge 19 growing, blooming, blossoming, bearing fruit over the next few years? What's your vision?
Yeah, so we've got some really exciting pilots going on. Right now, we're raising a pre-seed round, and we do have some investment open on that. So if anyone wants to invest, then please do get in touch. Otherwise, we're looking for people who are interested in piloting with us and testing the software that we generate. As we go forward, I think we can make a meaningful dent within the climate space, looking at making people's work more efficient, making their lives more enjoyable, and giving that future generation a chance.
Oh, fascinating. So you're raising investment. Are you using a particular platform to gather in those contributions, or how's it working?
Just through network, really. So it's just me. That's the other thing you'd learn as an entrepreneur to be is shameless. So asking everyone I meet if they've got some money and would they like to invest it. So that's the way it's working at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. And you're also looking for pilots as well. What's your profile for pilots?
Yeah, so companies which have got sort of at least 30 to 40 employees who are making products, particularly if these are products which are being installed either in other devices or in the field, or need to be maintained, and they're looking for people in non-office-based work to be doing that. So be really interested to see how we can support and making sure that we're designing a product that people actually want and need.
And then one more question. What actions can other individuals or businesses take today to contribute to a more sustainable future?
I think at the fundamental level, wherever possible, if we can start incorporating into our business models consideration of not just the profit we're generating, the financial return, but also the societal impact we can have and the environmental impact we can have as well, it goes a massive way. So lots of small actions add up into really big actions. So wherever possible, if there's a way to link profit generation with an increase in societal impact and environmental impact, then every pound of profit or every euro of profit that's being generated is having a positive effect out there that radiates, and the more of that we can generate, the better. So that's one thing I think every organization has the capacity to do, whether that's planting more trees or whether that's sort of sponsoring local teams or sponsoring local children or helping people get up the social ladder as well. This social mobility is something I'm deeply passionate about. So wherever we can help each other and create a better society for everyone, it's a positive thing for us all.
Great words and great actions you're taking to fulfill those, Amrit. And thank you so much. It's been an education. It's been absolutely fascinating, very exciting too. And we're going to watch your progress with great interest. Dr. Amrit Chandan, thank you very much for joining us on Green Money Matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris.
And that wraps up another episode of Green Money Matters. We hope you're feeling inspired to take your investments to new green heights. Remember, it's not just about the bottom line anymore. By aligning your investments with sustainable values, you have the power to shape a better future for generations to come.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to Green Money Matters on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an opportunity to grow your wealth sustainably. Together, let's make money matter for the planet.
And don't forget to leave us a review. We really would love to hear your thoughts or ideas for future episodes. Drop me a line by email at chris@greenmoneymatters.com.
Stay tuned for our next exciting episode, where we'll explore groundbreaking investment opportunities and unveil the secrets of successful sustainable investors. Until then, remember, green money matters. Because investing in our planet's future is the smartest choice you can make. Thanks for joining us.